Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Editor's Toolkit for Seamless Collaboration panel. My name is Joaquin Elizondo, and I am the creator of the Hollywood Editing Mentor program and podcast, and I'm just very excited to host this conversation with these talented editors. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. First up, she is an editor on Amazon's spinoff of The Boys called Gen V. Please welcome Mara Corey, ACE.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Great to have you here. Next, from Netflix's The Fall of the House of Usher, please welcome editor Brett Bachman.
Hello, very excited to be here.
And next we have the director and editor on Camp Hideout. Please welcome Sean Olson.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
And last but not least, we have an editor on Netflix's One Piece. Please welcome Eric Littman.
Hey, Joaquin, good to see you again, and thank you for having me.
And likewise, Eric. Well, I said, great to have all of you here, and really looking forward to our chat. I'm going to start it off with a couple of kind of general questions. I mean, feel free to just kind of step in with your answer. Maybe I'll call out on one of you to just kind of kick things off. But let's start off with talking about your favorite tool and or software that you find the most helpful during the collaborative process on a project. Brett, let's kick it off with you.
Oh boy, it's got to be Avid. It's got to be Avid Media Composer, just for the collaborating with my assistants, with sharing my work with my my co-editor and my showrunner on Fall of the House of Usher, Mike Flanagan. I couldn't imagine doing the job without it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Avid to me is a great collaborative tool, especially doing a heavy VFX show like Gen V. I don't know what House of Usher had in store for you, but having a VFX editor in there and an assistant editor and all sorts of people trying to get me the material to make the timing work. Avid is great for multi-user.
Yeah, likewise on my show, One Piece, we had a 24-hour cutting room in South Africa and also in LA, and everybody was on Avid. It just makes everything seamless. And we were able to transfer files back and forth with our visual effects team and with all the various assistants that we had. And it's just, I'm a big supporter of Avid, and I've always been a fan.
I got to agree with everybody here. It's Avid for me too. One of the other things that I like to use too is like working on with Frame.io. Posting cuts and getting feedback that way. Sometimes I even use Vimeo just to get some of the notes from the producers, but hardcore Avid all the time.
Yeah, I used Frame.io on a stand-up show I just finished cutting, and it was really helpful with the director because she could just note right on it. So
yeah, that's the thing I really like. I like it when they can note it on the actual file, because so many times I've got time code notes that are inaccurate because, you know, they use the play feature and they don't see the embedded time code, and so I get weird numbers or whatever. But it's great.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah,
I'm also going to give a shout out to Evercast. I really enjoy using them. It's just it makes work from home so much easier. They have all the tools embedded right there that you can use to, especially when you're doing like VFX reviews, you can draw on the screen and discuss what you're looking at, and it's just a really seamless tool in the new workflow that's out there today.
I'll ditto that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ditto that on Evercast. We got done with a 104-day shoot. My director on my show went back home to Philadelphia, and we did half of our director's cut on our TV show through Evercast. I can't imagine doing something like that. Being away from your family for that long and having come to LA for another 2-3 months.
Yeah, I was worked on a show called Acapulco, which our director actually lives in Florence, Italy. And so he would be up at like midnight. We'd be on Evercast, and I'd be like, "Are you ready to go to bed yet, dude?" He's like, "No, just one more hour. We can do this." So I'm like, "Okay."
So Avid for the win. Now here's a question: Who actually has used 2023 version 2023?
I'm on 2022.
Okay, all right.
I'm 2022.
All right, so you moved on from 2018 at least.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great to hear. Yeah, and look, honestly, I get this question a lot. Like, you know, do I need to learn Avid? And clearly, if to those listeners here, yes, if you want to work in film and scripted TV shows here, especially union projects, I think it's safe to say that Avid's still the industry standard.
Yeah, I would say so. And you know, if and when another editing software comes up like Premiere or Resolve, you're able to sort of translate what you know from Avid into the language of that software. So it to me, it's a huge strength to know that stuff.
Totally. No, Avid vote has my vote as well. Can you walk us through what ideal workflow on a project looks like? And what are the critical steps in the collaborative process? Mara, maybe let us know
Well,
how
I
the
will
process is
say,
like.
I mean, for me, it's you know, being organized and detailed. So the best workflow to me, make sure you have a dailies house. I know with lower productions, you don't sometimes get dailies houses, which can be so hard. A dailies house, then getting the footage into the hands of your assistant and whoever they are, organizing it to your specs. I love it that every editor has their own way of working with footage. And I have a spec sheet that I give to whoever I'm working with to give them my specific needs when I want grouping or how I want my bins to look, how I want my starts and stops, my resets to be marked, how I want improv to be marked, how I want script sync to look. And that way it gives them a guide as we move forward to make it simpler when questions do arise. There's a baseline. So once the assistant gets it, transcodes, gets it in the system, then, you know, for me, it's off and running until I get to director's notes. And workflow to me is just every day communicating with my assistant, finding out what we need to do, task that day, make sure that they know what page we're on, what the goals are for the end of the day, then hand it, you know, once we get it to directors and go through the producer notes, again, just communication. So for me, a workflow is an open door policy, talking with everyone on staff, including post coordinators, post supers, post producers, PAs, just to make sure that they have a open communication. So when things do go wrong, because they will, you can work on solving the problems as you know, as you go, and it'll be easier if you can talk. So that's for me.
Yeah. To expand upon that too, one of the things I really found that's worked well for me the last few years is once we have editorial up and running, to begin to discuss the creative of the show with my assistants and my visual effect editor, to make sure that, I mean, because they're going to be one of my prime key collaborators in addition to the showrunner, the director. I mean, they're my right-hand person. So making sure we're creatively aligned as well as we understand it to be before we begin to work on a director's cut. So if they're contributing, whether it be sound work or temp visual effects, or sometimes even, you know, their own edits, I can work with them on, you know, trying to find the identity and the voice of the show together.
Yeah, I agree. I find like an assistant editor is a teammate versus somebody who works for you, because as a solid team, especially, and just as you said, sound design for me is a huge part of what they're doing to help enliven any sort of work you're doing. I think sound does so much to sell the cut. So I agree that open, like, again, having that collaborative feeling.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Laura and Brett. I look at my assistant as a 100%, you know, teammate. I like to discuss also, you know, the temp music. That's another big thing for me. That sort of helps dictate the sound of the show, the pace, and just the general feeling. But I also and once I start to do that, I kind of, it's like I tell them what I'm thinking about in terms of the sound, and I let them just go and do their thing. And then that to me is, you know, they're learning, and they're also expanding on their creative experience, but also it's helping the show, and it helps me. So I'm able to concentrate on the picture. And one of the other things I like to do, especially beginning of the show, is really get a clear sense of the vision and the goals that the director and the producers are trying to set out to achieve. So once that gives me some direction as to how I'm going to cut the show.
I completely agree. I go that same route where I'd like to have a meeting or a conversation or a call with, if it's something that I'm not directing, then with the director or the producer, to really get like examples and ideas and things that they've kind of have in their head leading into it. But also I've also communicated a lot with like the cinematographer as well. Like once the project's done, depending on the show I'm on, you know, we talk about things as well. Like he'll tell me like, oh yeah, these are some of the things that we did on set or whatever, kind of keep an eye out for it and that. So we've had like a constant conversation in that regard. But a lot of it is like, you know, really just kind of making sure that you have the information that you need to support the vision of the producer, the director, the entire team.
Speaking of, like, say, communicating with a cinematographer, I mean, what does that interdepartment workflow look like between, say, editors on a show? I mean, when you're communicating, say, now, you know, with the sound team, maybe a composer. I mean, how are ideas explored from episode to episode, or even from scene to scene between other collaborators, say, outside of maybe like an assistant editor?
Well,
Eric, maybe let's kick it off with,
no, I was going to say, because Gen V was huge on VFX, so it was really important to work with the VFX editor to get temp VFX just right, so we could time out all of these soup scenes and make sure that the fight scenes were working. So that was huge. I mean,
I'll talk to the composer about like if they've had conversations with the director about where they want the score to go, to get some of their ideas on, you know, what type of temp music should we do so it doesn't contrast with what their goals are going to be once they're actually doing, you know, once they're doing the music for the film. And then I also am in contact with the sound designer. I mean, a lot of times because I'm the director, but also if I'm hired on something, I'll talk to the sound designer and if there's a sound effect that I don't have or something in the library that I wish I had, you know, it's a kind of a, you know, back and forth. Hey, do you have this? Can you send me this? And so that's been kind of a constant as well.
I've been very fortunate to work on shows where I've been brought in early enough to go to participate in tone meetings and pre-production meetings, and you get so much insight as to what everyone's looking to achieve. And I just go to these meetings and I'm literally just a fly in the wall. I write down a couple of notes here or there, what each intent of the scene is and what people say. So that way, when I'm cutting the scene, I know what to look for, and I know what the goals were. And then in terms of one piece in particular, there was a lot of scenes because we were working in blocks. So by the time I came on and was doing an episode, a concept that had already been addressed in another episode, and they were able to say, "Hey, can we try that in your episode?" Specifically, the split screens that we did. I cut a montage of a board game scene, which was kind of complicated, and people were worried about it. And I felt when we cut it in the traditional montage style, it worked really well. And then somebody said, "Hey, can we try split screens for this?" So okay, let me see what other editors have done. And then once you see that what they did, it sort of gets you thinking in a different creative way. And I had the template for what was done, and I was able to execute that on that scene and various other scenes. So it works well in a very collaborative way with various other editors to see what they've done.
I did a split screen as well on a show I was on, and I kind of did it I was like, I'm taking a risk by doing this, but it's like a 70s kind of heist vibe. And so I did the split screen thinking, oh, they're probably going to throw it out. And now they decided that they liked it so much, they wanted it as transitions throughout the entire show. So then I'm handing it off to like some of the other editors that we, you know, had on the show. And so we're like going back and forth on different styles. So it just didn't look like a bunch of square boxes, you know,
right.
All sorts of different things.
So we were fortunate and maybe a bit of a hurdle that it was sort of like whatever you want to do in terms of split screens, just make it interesting. So there was infinite options, which was kind of cool because you weren't constrained to certain styles. But
I think it makes it fun sometimes.
It does. It absolutely does. But when you're looking at a blank canvas, sometimes you go, "Oh, okay, where do we start?"
The other thing with split screens is they do one note, that thread pulls your entire part. It just pulls it all apart.
Oh my gosh!
Give me the time to do it.
And the positioning of where something is, and the white point, and if you extend it.
I got 10 layers here, dude.
Yeah.
Amara, I actually have a question for you here. In your work on Gen V, what conversations did you have with the with other creatives about keeping the tone and integrity of The Boys? And was there any crossover between collaborators?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, crossover for sure. I mean, since we were in the same world, it needed to have, Gen V needed to have its own voice, but still feel like it was in the universe of The Boys. So um, we had killer showrunners with Michelle Fizakis and Tara Butters, and also Eric Kripke was there, who was the showrunner for The Boys, who's awesome, who, you know, kept us focused and on track. And we had David Calder, who is the editor on The Boys, come in to do the pilot. So we had tons of input on what fight scenes were supposed to look like, what the composer, same composer. So we had the sound, but still tried to thematically gear it towards this new show. So it was really important to make it feel like one world. So we did a ton of communication. Same VFX producer too at the end. He moved from The Boys onto us. So really a lot of continuity.
I love The Boys. I definitely got to check out Gen V. Brett, question for you. What visual cues did you take from The Fall of the House of Usher's designers and DPs, director of photography, to help enhance the mood of this piece?
Yeah, good question. I ended up working very closely with our DP on the show because he was also one of our co-directors. We had two directors on the entire miniseries, and he was also one of the executive producers as well. So he was heavily involved in all of development, production, and post. Mr. Michael Famignari, quite a talent. So Usher is a bit unique in the sense that it is a very wide-ranging, very diverse show. I mean, we have raves, we have gloomy Gothic mansions, we have claustrophobic medical spaces. You get a little bit of everything in the show. And so it's also a bit Giallo inspired as well. So you have these kind of shifts in tone and perspective that begin to enter subjectivity. And so we're playing a little bit of everything. We have kind of a gloomy, haunted-like mansion or house that we're dealing with. And so you're taking the what looks like liminal space and trying to tease out what could be in the corners, what could be out of view, what could be upstairs. So, you know, utilizing a lot of sound elements for that, trying to kind of match the tone of the photography. And you also have a lot of boardroom scenes, a lot of dialogue-driven scenes where they're shooting tons of coverage, lots of singles, and the photography lends itself to being cut very quickly, which would be the exact opposite of a scene where it's meant to be kind of more suspense-driven or horror-driven, which we really stretch out and we let moments linger. So you're following, kind of trying to kind of chase and parallel the tone of the photography in that way, and hopefully adding to it, adding to the entire emotional experience.
Awesome, Brett. Well, Sean, now I have a question for you. As the director and editor for Camp Hideout, how did you develop the comedic language for the film?
That was something that I had worked really hard with the DP on how we would stretch moments out, or how we would kind of create this energy, because it is a kid driven film with Christopher Lloyd as our big comedic person. But a lot of it was, kind of creating this energy. So the comedic elements, like we had a contrast between like long, fluid camera takes where we would, steady cam around, but then we would contrast it with a lot of fast cutting editorial scenes with like the slips and the falls and those things. And so one of the things that, comedy is so subjective. It's like what's funny for one person is totally different for somebody else. So you would go into it, and if the script was written really, really well with a lot of really good comedic moments, so we're trying to kind of pull the comedy from that. But we shot a lot of extra material. Like we had scenes where they're in a mud pit and there's like 3 minutes of footage in a mud pit, and a lot of it was funny, but honing that in and making that tight and trying to separate yourself from being on set and experiencing those things to actually being an editorial and cutting it together. And so a lot of the times, to kind of make sure that comedy was working, like I've got 2 boys and that's kind of the target audience. And so I wouldn't show them anything. And then they'd come in my office and I'd show them scenes and I'd kind of see how they responded, if it was funny, if they laughed, or if they didn't laugh. And the thing about them is they'll tell me if something is like cringe for them, if they don't think it's funny. So it's a lot of that, but we also had a lot of really good stunt people, because there is a lot of those like Home Alone kind of hijinks. And so even prior to shooting certain scenes, our stunt team, they would send me footage of, these are all of our like ideas for like slips and falls and stuff based on the conversations that we had the day before. And so those kind of gave me an idea of, oh, this is really funny because it's my first reaction to something. And so then we just kind of carried it through.
I welcome. I feel like cutting a comedy would be a nice challenge that I would definitely welcome.
Well, and having somebody like Christopher Lloyd in the movie, who is already like, he's funny in like almost everything that he does, like created that, just elevated all of the material, because he gives you so many different things to work off of. And you give him different improv, throw different ideas out, and he'll give you a whole bunch of different things, all of them being funny in their own little way. And then you just gotta kind of, hone it in while you're in post.
Awesome. And Eric, while on One Piece, what insights did you learn from the franchise's creator, Ichiro Oda, and how did it shape the edit of the show?
Well, he definitely had a clear vision. He knew what he wanted to. He knew what he wanted the show to be, and he gave us a lot of. He was very complimentary of the show when he first saw it. He gave us a lot of notes, a lot of good notes, really good notes to really shape the show to honor his original vision of the manga. And a lot of that translated into addressing the opening of the pilot. When I was brought onto the show, I originally was brought on to cut episodes 3 and 4. But like with every show, the pilot always is a thing. And the original editor of that show was Kevin Ross, and he did a terrific job putting that episode together. And then he had to go off to another show. And then Tessa Verfas, who was another editor on our show, she took over the pilot for a brief amount of time over in South Africa. And then she had to leave. So I was the next guy up. So I took over the pilot, and my focus was to handle really the opening, getting us into the One Piece world, which is kind of a complicated world. It's Earth, but it's not Earth. It's pirates. There's people, modern day technology, new technology. There's fish people. There's all kinds of stuff that we're trying, and different genres are trying to all cram into this world. And he gave us very clear notes, and I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of different departments, especially when we did some reshoots to really make sure we were nailing the Easter eggs of certain characters that we were seeing in that opening sequence. We had a great visual effects department with Victor Scalise and Scott Ramsey. Just want to give them a shout out, and our showrunners Matt Owens and Steve Maeda, that we were able to really just hone in that scene, and the first 20 minutes in particular, so that way it was a smooth sailing for the rest of the show, no pun intended. And we were so it was a great collaboration with all the departments, including Oda, with his notes. And a little side note here: Oda's notes come with private sketches from him, which was kind of cool. So I have a little keepsake there.
Storing them safely in some place.
Yes.
Well, speaking of communication, collaboration, and this is a question for everyone, what is the dialogue like between you and the director or showrunner or producers as you work through the evolution of a project, and how does that conversation change as the project moves from the beginning phases to the final phases? So maybe, I don't know, bring us into that cutting room and give us a taste of what that looks like, say, when you are collaborating with, say, in this case, a showrunner or a director or other producers.
Well, hopefully, when I start, I'm hoping I can have a conversation with the showrunner before I get started, so I have a sense of their priorities, their objectives with the show. And usually that relegates to three things. It's story, it's tone, theme, or maybe four things. Emotion, too. What do you really want the audience to get out of this to inform kind of a trickle-down effect to all of your decisions that you make over the next weeks, months, year, depending on how long you're on the project for. We try and kind of get into their head, whether that be references, whether that be just talking about other stories, other forms of mediums. For Fall of the House of Usher, my showrunner, Mike Flanagan, right off the bat was like, it's a karmic fantasy. This is a satire about very horrible people getting what's coming to them. And we should be rooting for their downfall. We certainly, I want to take a nuanced look at them. I want you to develop a sense of empathy for these characters, but they are not redeemable individuals. So there's a bit of a celebration that takes place over the course of these 8 episodes when you see their character failures, their inability to change and make the morally right decision. So first and foremost, when we start out, it's kind of an overall view of the show before we get more granular, more specific, as the process goes on, which I'm sure someone else can speak to as well.
Well, yeah, for me, I do like to have those conversations, but in my experience, there's the 3 stories that you make: the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one you edit. So as much as the conversation, the intent is there, I personally like to keep that in the back of my mind, but watch all the footage and try to figure out what the footage is telling me. So like in terms of the boys, we knew what the tone was, which was great. But there was a different theme coming through with the characters, because character to me is always king. So I like to do my first cut and see what's working, what's not, because your first cut's never going to be the final product. It's never going to work as the finished piece. And then when I go to the director, I present them what I think is the best version of the full cut. I may pick up lines and maybe rearrange scenes depending on what I'm feeling. I like to take those risks because we can always put it back. So I want to make sure that they see what I think is the better version. Then with the director, they can do what I get, a whole new insight on what they had, which again, with directors, they have an idea, but may not match what the showrunners want. So that's what's interesting about being an editor in a series, is more what the showrunners want than guest directors who come through. They have these great ideas, but it's communicating what, for instance, what the showrunners are going to want. For Gen V, fight scenes are fast and furious and like really impactful. So any sort of lingering sort of choreography isn't going to work. And to impart that information in is my job to the director, while they can give me what their vision is. And then after the director gets it and the showrunner gets it, that's when I think the real work comes in to make it and hone it and rearrange it, restructure, get the cuts right, get the pacing right. And for me, it really helped in Gen V, especially because I'd worked with Michelle and Tara before. It was my first time working with Eric Kripke, but I had a shorthand with Michelle and Tara, so it was easier to communicate. I kind of had an idea of what they wanted, and so that kind of sped up the process.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
Sean, no.
Oh yeah. Oh, so a lot of the projects that I've done that have, like television shows and whatnot, like a lot of it is like, really kind of, the same as, getting into the head of the director, kind of seeing the material and it's taking those risks. It's changing and doing something interesting and different with the footage. And sometimes it's condensing scenes that are maybe too long on paper, that what is the latest you can get in and the earliest you can get out, and how do you make that work? And I worked on a show with a lot of music. It was a hip hop show with a ton of music, and a lot of these scenes were just them performing for 2 minutes or so. And after the first like 20 seconds, you're like, okay, like I got the idea. So a lot of it was, what story points, if they want the song, what story points can I throw in there and intercut and make it work? and testing it out, because
Yeah.
scripted wise, you just see they perform and then here's this scene. And so, on that show we had, I was a director on the show, but we had two other directors, and we worked on a whole bunch of different like ideas and ways to kind of condense that. And one of the directors, Jade, she had this great idea to use, vocals at the end, because there was always like a tie-in at the end. It was always like this character that will narrate like the last part that kind of leads into like a nice little finale to kind of set up the next episode. And she came up with some really good ideas where we'd use vocal songs that weren't like performed, and create this like montage that led us into this like escalation point. And it was such a fun experience to kind of get to toy around and play around with it and throw out different options and things like that.
Yeah.
But
I call it getting fired for the right reasons. You want to like present your best self, right?
Yeah.
And I talk a lot in the Bay, so I like to throw ideas out, especially when I'm doing comedy or any sort of thing. Like Gen V was satire, so there's a lot of ideas to throw. But especially when I'm doing comedy, I did this Netflix comedy with David Wayne, who's amazing to work with, cult comedy guy. And we would just kind of spitball ideas in the Bay and make sure that it was the funniest or the best, the funniest it could be. Dig out those comedy moments and make things work that maybe weren't working as well.
I also find it's like you got to find the right temp music, because if you put in the wrong temp music, it changes the whole vibe of everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes you can just strip away the music and put new music in, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's so different." And it's there. So
I like to when I'm pitching ideas, just create lots of different alternate versions, and that way it's easier to explain what you're thinking, as opposed to theoretically say, well, what if we tried this? And as sometimes my words aren't as strong, as opposed to just showing them on screen what I'm thinking. And there was a number of instances on one piece that we had these scenes that were really great scenes, very long dramatic scenes, and but they took time.
Yeah.
And we got a note probably from Oda, is there a way to intercut this? And we all sort of looked at it like, well, I don't know, let me think about that. And the great thing about working with Matt Owens and Steve Maeda on One Piece is they just gave me the time and luxury to do these things, because we weren't up against hard air dates. And they said, well, look it over and we'll get back to you and let us know when it's ready to.
That's a testament. That's a testament to your relationship with them as well, though, for them to allow you that time. Because a lot of times well, if you can't do it in 5 seconds, forget it. And you're like, I have such a great idea. Hold on. Let me.
Well, I was fortunate enough to work with Matt Owens prior on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So he and I had a good rapport. He knew me. He knew, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I mean, it was a network show. You had to be real fast on that show, and that could get complicated in that world. But in this one, he knew who I was. I'd like to think he trusts me. I think he does. And he said, well, we'll get back to you. You let us know. And what I was able to steal was from the show you and I worked on, Joaquin, Hot Zone. I had another similar experience where we get these long, drawn out interrogation scenes. Again, somebody said the same thing. How do we make this work? These are good scenes, but they're just taking forever. And what we did was we intercut. And we created the artificial ins and outs. And if you add an ADR line here or change this there, you're able to make it work, and it works out really well. And I was able to take those concepts, implement it into, as we all do, implement it into my current show. And I was able, in one scene in particular, in episode 3, Usopp and Kaya are talking to Luffy and Nami about their love, or they're hiding their love for each other, even though they are in love with each other. And I was able to intercut it, and then by changing a couple lines, we were able to create a question and answer intercut. And when I was able to pitch this to the producers, they were just absolutely thrilled that we were able to do this. And of course, the lines that I put in there didn't stay, but it gave them a template for what the line should be, which is
Yeah, the idea, right?
That's the
Yeah.
idea. And, you know, more than happy to, you know, here's the template, go for it.
Yeah.
It was a great
We
collaboration.
did a big restructure on the finale at Gen V too, just because when we got in there was a lot of emotional moments. So the whole episode is supposed to be the school, like it's the culmination of this thing, and it's like a school shooting almost. So they wanted to keep this really high tension, and we had also these really heavy emotional scenes throughout. So when we first laid it out, it was like high tension scene, high tension scene, high tension scene. And it was like, whoa, we're losing the thread of the excitement of what we're doing. So we just scrambled a bunch of stuff, and you know, with the magic of ADR and doing exactly what you just said, create an episode that you know, really you feel that tension all the way through and not lose those really solid grounded character moments that what I think makes any story great.
Well, and it keeps the through line. Sometimes if you have, like you said, high intensity, you're up in the, you forget what the original point of the scene is. But if you do these intercuts, you never lose that through line, and it stays through the whole episode.
Powerful.
You just reminded me of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I forgot about that. You work with Kelly Stuyvesant.
I did. She speaks very highly of you.
Yeah, we just did Griselda together.
Great she's great. Yeah.
Well, as we wrap this up, one last question for all of you. You know, we've been talking about, say, you know, collaboration and workflows, and so what is one piece of advice you would like to give to editors out there as they develop their workflow, as far as like what to do, but also maybe what not to do, especially with collaborating and, you know, communicating with showrunners and directors?
I'll go. I'll say, and this pertains a lot to my career. Be patient. You know, just every experience is a learning experience, and take those experiences and implement it into your next show or your next working environment. And listen. When you're working with people, it's really important to listen, because that will help you make creative decisions. And it really helps shape the way you're cutting scenes, and it helps you make creative decisions and also give your own voice, because now you're collaborating with people.
I would say, well, first of all, learn Avid, but so I would say don't be too precious about your cut. You know, a lot of people, you know, you turn in a cut, your cut is going to change no matter what. There's too many people involved. You know, you have the director, you have the producer, the showrunner, like, or the network. And, you know, don't get too precious on it. And don't, you know, it's not your, you know, it's your place to present options and serve the story. But, you know, if something changes or whatever, you know, you can't get too down on yourself on it, or you can't get too down at all on it. Because, you know, you don't get to, you know, you get to throw out your ideas and things, but at the end of the day, you know, there's other people that, you know, they overrule you in that regard. And also, you know, there's that relationship that you have in the edit bay with the director. That's like a very precious relationship. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, it sometimes becomes like a therapy session where, you know,
Sometimes
the director's like, I didn't get this and this didn't happen, and oh, you gotta hot, you know, please don't show this person, or this person's doing this weird thing that I didn't catch until afterwards. And so, you know, you kind of create that safe space that, you know, for the director or the showrunner or whomever, and, you know, just be very empathetic to, you know, your time there, and, you know, do your best to throw out as many ideas and options, you know, as you can, you know, while you're cutting.
I think there's a really interesting dynamic of putting your best work forward, of being proud of your work, and standing behind it, but also simultaneously being open to critique, being open to feedback, and saying, and hearing feedback that might be from a director saying, like, this didn't really work at all, and having the collaborative skills to say, screw it, let's go back in, let's rip it apart, let's build it back together, or let's try another approach on it. That constant thing of checking your ego, being open to ideas, but also, you know, protecting your ideas simultaneously is an interesting balance. And I think that's something that only really experience can kind of teach you. But I would say, yeah, practice people skills, check your ego, and be a helper. I mean, I think about every job I've undergone. It's there to collaborate, it's there to listen, it's there to work, you know, it's to help.
Yes, I agree with everything you guys say. The only thing I would add is don't be a jerk. Like you set the tone of your bay. That's it. I'm in there, so anybody who walks in there, I'm the ambassador to the show. Whether that's my PA, coordinator, EP, head of the network, someone's dog. I just want to make sure that everybody feels not that I need to bend over back, but they need to feel that they have a safe environment to create their ideas that also opens up ideas for you. And these people, you're trying to create a community of people who want to work together and to be kind to the people who are all around you, whether they're above or below on the hierarchy scale. I feel it's really important to work that way. So don't be a jerk.
Yeah, 100%.
That's saying no. I mean, I appreciate all that advice. Of course, a lot of these things is, you have to be there to experience this and do it. So again, again, thank you for sharing this advice here with our listeners, and just in general, thank you for being here today and having this great conversation about collaboration. So again, thank you for being here. That's all the time we have for today, and thank you to our panelists, Mara, Brett, Sean, and Eric, for being here with us today to discuss their incredible work. Also, thank you to Impact 24 PR for putting this panel together, and to all of you for watching and listening. So be sure to check out the Hollywood Editing Mentor podcast for other panels and interviews, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks again.